So there is, or was, rest in peace, a rapper named Juice WRLD. For the captions, Juice WRLD, as in orange juice or whatever, Juice WRLD. That was his name. And, which I don't judge because, we got weird names. And music since the beginning of time. So I won't, call yourself what you want to. What band would call themselves the Smashing Pumpkins and the Monkees? So, people call themselves weird things. So Juice WRLD, he died of a seizure. That was probably, they're suspecting, brought on by drugs. Now, the amount of drugs were like, he had superfluous amounts of drugs. He had Percocets and what else did they say? Well, not heroin, but anyway, there was a lot of drugs and he was taking them all at the same time, also mixing it with alcohol. And so the girlfriend's coming out and she's talking about all this stuff. And, he was battling mental illnesses and so forth and so forth and so forth. So he died of a seizure caused by a drug intake. And so everyone's coming out, in the industry and saying, well, the industry is so rough and these handlers from the music labels, they will give you whatever you want. You want drugs? Fine, I'll get you drugs. You want women? Fine, I'll get you women. You want a fast car? I'll get you a fast car. They'll give these people whatever they want just to keep them working, right? But in my mind, now mind you, I've never done drugs, but in my mind, I would think to myself, that seems counterproductive. Because there are some people in the industry, like, I forget what his name was, but he was a big guy, fat. He was a big guy. And so he got this new talk show or whatever, or not talk show, but TV show he was doing. I forget who it was, but I remember the story. And he said that once he signed the contract, he had to commit to losing weight. Oh, it was from Mike and Molly. If y'all remember that show, I forget her name too. Good Lord. Melissa McCarthy. It was Mike and Molly is what the name of the show was. He had to commit to losing weight because they and I had a contract. I remember him telling the story. And so in order for them to be healthy for the continuation of the story, even though the story was about two fat people who met, but they still needed your blood pressure under control, your cholesterol under control. They needed all these different health things from them to make sure that you were healthy for the show because we put a lot of money into you. So I applied the same thinking in this situation. Juice WRLD may be the star attraction at the label, but why would you give him things that harm him on purpose? Because at this point in his career, he is not worth more dead than alive. You could say that about Prince and Michael Jackson because they had gigantic catalogs and then they had all this money that you could make off of them after they died. Okay. But Juice WRLD is barely known by a lot of people. I'll just say it that way. So he does not have some giant catalog of music. He was like 23 years old. So why would the label give him all the drugs? I didn't understand that part. And so that's what I'm going to do. I want to know, did he get it on his own, or was the record label and a handler responsible for making sure he stayed doped up? Because again, why would you give him something to harm him when you need him healthy to make music and to do shows and all this other type of stuff? He doesn't even have a fan base barely yet. He's gone. So I don't understand the motivation behind keeping him high, especially right now when mental illness talks are a dime a dozen. Like you can go somewhere now and have a healthy discussion about mental illness. And so it seems as though he would be more apt to be the face for it. You know, this young rapper coming up, now he gets to talk openly about mental illness and da 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 da. So many people would, you know, that type of thing. So there's the record label. I get to tower the first card. Or was it him? Ace of Pentacle. This is my card for appeals. And then Nine of Swords, so anxiety. Like he did have a mental illness. The girlfriend was detailing, because she did too, and she was also hooked on drugs, about how, you know, they were battling depression, bipolar, that whole bit. So you get money in the tower, so money and disaster. Or you get pills and disaster. And then there's your mental illness. This is unchecked mental illness. Checked mental illness is my Four of Swords. That's where you check yourself into therapy. Now the Four of Swords, if it gets worse, it becomes the 9. It is more than doubled. Yeah, substance abuse, big time. This is him, the person at the center, the Knight of Cups. And then my card for substance abuse, 9, or the 3 of Cups. I get 3 of Cups or 9 of Cups. 9 of Cups for me is alcoholism, but this one is substance, as in you take a little bit of everything. The Chariot and Strength. I don't think this is the record label. I think he just has people around him who didn't check his behavior. But here's the other thing. He's an adult. And yes, if you see something, you say something. But you cannot make a person get help. You can kick them, you can take them dragging and screaming and kicking and throw them into the room and we'll make them sit there until they dry out. But they'll just climb out the window. Addiction is not something you just kick to the curb. Sometimes it's a thing that is extremely hard. I think it was just him. Well, let's see. Yep, there's the fear, the child, and then there's the hopes. There's a, yeah, it was him. So it was an aspect to this. The people around him kept him powerless. So I'm going to say it was him, but it was not, because they're basically the people, and these are the people inside the music industry that are saying this, that this music industry is so complicated, it's so disastrous, and they just go after people, and people can't survive fame and this and this and this, but the people around him kept him powerless. There was a glimmer of hope, but it was, again, you can't make a person get help. The indecision. There's a supportive person there. This seems like a older woman. Maybe it doesn't feel like his mother. It seems like a guardian or teacher or something like that he looked up to at one point in his life. That person is behind. But 7 of Swords. It's a very interesting image for this in particular discussion. You couldn't help him if he didn't want to help himself. And there's the fortune. Fortune's wheel, the Star, and the Hermit. which means the person who was at the center of attention was also isolated and alone. It is very possible to feel alone in a crowd. That was him. Well, that's sad. If you need help, get help. Moral of the story.